dreamt about. They'd walked the length and breadth of Venice, Paris, Rome, and Athens. Now, en route to London, they'd stopped off in Jersey, the largest of the British Channel Islands, just off the French coast.
"Watch where you're treading,"
Doug warned his wife, offering his arm.
"There are lots of loose stones."
"What's that?" They'd come up to some metal structures, one a round block sticking up out of a concrete bunker with a thick metal pole going through its middle, and the others 2 metal domes. This was Battery Lothringen, one of the fortifications built in the island by the occupying German forces during the Second World War.
"That's the rangefinder,"
Doug said, consulting his guidebook and pointing to the first structure with the arms.
"And those are observation cupolas. Just take a look at that view they'd have had. Not surprising they chose to build here. They'd have seen anything coming for miles."
The pair of them stood and just looked for a few moments.
"Somewhere here is the memorial to the U.S. Navy PT boat squadron that my dad was part of. They lost some men when they attacked a German convoy taking armaments between the Channel Islands,"
Doug added, turning away from the sea to concentrate back on land. The couple walked a little further and came to the other side of the narrow headland that looked out across St. Oban's Bay, with St. Helier in the distance. Doug stopped, taking some time to think about his father and the men who had died.
"It wasn't the Germans who built all this, though, was it? Those poor slave workers did."
Nancy had a Polish grandparent, and she'd already got upset the day before at the memorial to the forced workers at Le Hougobi. Now, she brushed her hands across the soft heads of the hare's tail grasses which were growing against the granite wall beside her, finding comfort in their touch.
"It doesn't look much," she ventured, looking at the metal structures. "It's like an iceberg, Nancy. We're standing on top of a huge tower. It's got 5 floors, would you believe?"
Doug waved the guidebook in her direction. Behind them, another couple of cars had joined theirs in the car park, slowly scrunching to a halt in the dusty gravel. The spot was a regular for tourists and dog walkers. The Millers had been first to arrive, up early, keen to maximise their sightseeing for what was only a short trip to the island. Having looked at the size of Jersey when they were planning their trip, they hadn't expected to need long to cover the 9 by 5 miles island, the whole place smaller than Pittsburgh, but had been surprised by just how much there was to see. 20 minutes later, the sun was starting to climb, and Nancy was feeling the heat. They'd walked past a giant gun, which they'd read was No. 2 gun, and read a blue plaque which talked about the naval battle off the Point on the 9th of August 1944, and pointed to the memorial that Doug had wanted to find. They then came to a concrete slope that led downwards, with metal safety railings all around the top.
"I'm going to look down here,"
Nancy said to her husband, who had stopped to inspect the mustard yellow lichen on the granite wall next to some steps. He was a retired microbiologist, with more than a passing interest in lichenology. Nancy walked down the slope, feeling the warmth of the sun on the top of her head. On her right was an open passageway, which led inside to what she presumed would have been bunkers. There was a rusting metal frame on the door, with hinges that had once held a door.
"I'm just going inside here,"
she called out to Doug as she stepped up into the bunker, looking forward to some cool air.
"You coming?"
The interior was dark, just a scrap of light coming down from the ceiling further inside. Other than that, it was only the shaft of sun from the doorway that gave any illumination. And so Nancy had pulled her mobile phone from her pocket and turned on the torch. All of this section was built from light grey concrete slabs. It wasn't a large area. There were 2 entrances leading off on the right, both again missing their actual doors. She struggled to see inside.